Hey, my friends, let's review some various tips for camping. In particular, if you're new to camping, some tips to help you set up your campground. The first is to look for level ground. Right here in front of me, it's not level at all. We have bits of rock sticking out of the ground, and we would have to move up quite a bit to find some level ground. So just be aware that you might be able to stick your tent somewhere in between two rocks, and it may be somewhat level, but it's going to be miserable to have to walk over things. You could trip over rocks. You're going to have all these obstacles, and that's not really ideal. Plus, if you look up, there's all kinds of tree branches. It may not be that easy to see in this camera, but there's branches almost right above me that are broken off. These are pretty small, but other places on the property, there's some large branches, and you really want to be careful to put any kind of shelter underneath of those. If they fall, they could really injure you or even kill you if they're large enough. So level ground. Don't put your shelter on the top of a hill or mountain. And also don't go too low near like a body of water. You want to go somewhere in between the lowest point, the lowest elevation, and the highest elevation. It typically is ideal, and it has a lot to do with the bodies of water will cool your tent down and your shelter down pretty quick at night. At least in some situations, it can certainly do that. And if you're too high as well, there's a lot of wind up there. Or there's a potential for wind, and it can also cool you a lot faster. Somewhere in the middle, you have more protection. To the left of me here, there's a large pile of debris, and there's just a lot of trees and limbs. And because I know this particular part of my property pretty well, I know there's a lot of things that live in this massive debris pile. This debris pile is about 60 feet long and about 25 feet wide. It's really hard to show you this on camera, but it's big, and it's about 6 feet tall in some places. And so there's rabbits that live in here. We have chipmunks. There's birds that have nests in here. There's snakes in here. So this is not something that you'd want to climb on or play in, because there's animals' homes in here, and there's also some very dangerous animals like rattlesnakes that live in here. So you want to be careful about where you explore, and especially if you have kids. You don't want them to be climbing through or tearing through a debris pile like this near your campsite. Another thing to consider when you're putting up your shelter, especially if you have like a tent that has an entranceway that you can face it in a direction, you want to try to face it east so that in the morning you can open up that entrance and let the warm sunlight warm up the inside of your shelter. You don't have to do this, but it really is a nice thing to do. But if you're under like a very heavy canopy of trees, like in a dense forest, it may not make a difference which direction you face your entrance. But if you have a clearing and you're camping in a clearing, it could be really nice to wake up, with the sun coming through the entrance. When you're looking at where you're going to have your tent relative to your campfire, you want to try to make sure at all times that you take in account of where the wind is blowing, what direction the wind is blowing. So try to keep your shelter upwind to minimize the smoke from a campfire. This is common sense, but man, there are so many people who don't even pay attention to where the wind is blowing. They're just like, oh, I'm going to put my tent here, and I'm going to put my campfire right here. And then all night they have smoke blowing back in their tent or in their tarp, and it's just miserable. You can get sick off of that. You also want to make sure you really clean the debris from the ground, especially before you put up your tent. It's really easy in some cases for things to be poking out of the ground to puncture the floor of your tent. Also, there could be debris that could be highly flammable. Could be various bits of bark or leaves that if the campfire was to spill over by accident, it could cause possibly a forest fire, and you don't want that. So I try to keep at least 15 to 20 feet around my campfire cleared at all times, as well as I keep like at least a gallon or two of water on standby. Some people use a fire extinguisher, whatever is something that you feel comfortable that is effective. Lastly, I just want to point out that for some people in some environments, it might be helpful to build a reflector on the backside of your campfire, opposite of where your shelter is, to help reflect some light and heat back to you. Sometimes this is not necessary, obviously, but it can be very simple as well. It could just be a few logs that you pile up a distance away that they won't catch on fire, but they do reflect a bit. Some people use foil, reflective materials. There's all kinds of things. Mylar sheeting. There's all kinds of things that can help reflect. But you can experiment. You know, I would definitely experiment before you go camping if you want to do something like that, or if you think you need that. It can also help cooking too. When you can direct and focus more heat to one point where you're cooking at, it can cook faster. Things cook faster. So common sense, but a lot of people just don't do the reflector. They think, oh, I just don't need that, or that's just ridiculous, that's overkill. But on a really cold night, I can tell you from experience that it makes a difference. It really does. I mean, I'm not sure if I could give you a percentage of increase of warmth, but you can feel the difference. And so that's enough for me. I want to thank everyone for checking out my videos. And if you have any additional tips for the beginner that's getting into camping, please leave that in the comment section. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the like button. And I really do appreciate if everyone shares the videos with a family member or a friend. You guys take care, and I'll catch you on the next one.